Emily Rahman walked into her honeymoon suite expecting the first night of forever with Daniel Clarke, but instead she found him in bed with her own sister, Sarah Rahman. A betrayal so shocking it shattered her marriage within hours of saying I do. What began as a perfect wedding in Toronto, filled with white roses and smiling family photos, turned into a silent storm of humiliation, secrets, and a revenge plan no one saw coming. Behind the elegance and celebration was a truth far darker than anyone imagined, and before the week was over, love had twisted into something deadly. Emily Rahman had always believed that her wedding day would be the happiest day of her life. She had grown up in Toronto after her family immigrated to Canada when she was a child. Over the years, she worked hard to build a stable career in real estate, earning respect for her intelligence and calm personality. Friends described her as responsible and protective, especially when it came to her younger sister, Sarah. The two sisters shared everything growing up: clothes, secrets, dreams, and future plans. Emily often felt more like a second mother than just a sibling. When Daniel Clarke entered her life, it seemed like fate. He was confident, well-spoken, and financially successful. He knew how to make a strong first impression. Their relationship moved quickly but smoothly. Daniel blended into the Rahman family with ease. He brought gifts to family dinners, helped Emily's parents with errands, and showed patience with Sarah's playful teasing. From the outside, he appeared to be the perfect future husband. The wedding itself was elegant and carefully organized. The venue overlooked Lake Ontario, decorated with white roses and crystal lights that reflected softly across the hall. Guests traveled from different provinces to attend. Laughter filled the room, glasses clinked in celebration, and cameras flashed nonstop. Sarah stood proudly beside Emily as maid of honor, adjusting her sister's veil and smiling for every photograph. Emily felt secure and proud as she signed the marriage certificate. She believed she was stepping into a life filled with loyalty, trust, and partnership. As the night continued and the guests slowly departed, she felt nothing but excitement for the future waiting just a few floors above in their honeymoon suite. The celebration lasted late into the evening. Music echoed through the banquet hall as guests slowly began to leave, offering hugs and blessings before stepping into the cool Toronto night. Emily remained surrounded by relatives for most of the reception, smiling for photographs and thanking everyone for attending. Daniel had disappeared briefly several times, explaining that he was handling payments and final arrangements with the venue staff. Emily did not question it. She trusted him completely. Close to midnight, Emily finally made her way to the luxury hotel suite reserved for their wedding night. The hallway was quiet, decorated with soft golden lighting that reflected against the polished walls. She still wore her white gown, slightly wrinkled from hours of dancing, but she did not mind. Her heart was full of anticipation. She imagined Daniel waiting inside, perhaps preparing a small romantic surprise. When she opened the suite door, the living area lights were dim. A faint sound came from the bedroom. At first, she assumed Daniel was changing clothes. She walked slowly toward the partially closed door, her heels making soft clicks against the wooden floor. The moment she pushed the door open, her entire world shifted. Daniel and Sarah were together in the bed meant for the newlyweds. The decorations arranged by hotel staff, rose petals and candles, framed a scene of betrayal. Emily stood frozen. Her mind struggled to process what her eyes were seeing. The trust she had built over years shattered instantly. She felt her pulse pounding in her ears, yet the room seemed silent. Without creating chaos or drawing attention, she stepped backward. She walked out of the suite with steady movements, holding herself together in a way no one would have expected. In that quiet hallway, something inside her changed forever. The days after the wedding passed in a strange and heavy silence. Emily returned to her condominium alone, still wearing the emotional weight of that night. She sent brief messages to relatives, explaining that she and Daniel needed time to rest and adjust. No one suspected anything unusual. Photographs from the wedding were already circulating online, showing smiling faces and perfect moments frozen in time. Inside her home, However, Emily began to piece together the truth. She replayed memories from the past few months, noticing details she had once ignored. There were times when Daniel and Sarah had laughed too comfortably together. There were private phone calls that stopped when she entered a room. There were unexplained schedule changes and last-minute errands. At the time, she believed she was simply being insecure. Instead of confronting them immediately, Emily chose silence. She understood that emotional reactions would only give them power. She needed clarity, not chaos. Using her experience in real estate contracts and financial documents, she began checking shared accounts and transaction histories. She found hotel reservations under Daniel's name from weeks before the wedding. She saw restaurant charges made on evenings when he claimed to be working late. Phone records revealed repeated contact between Daniel and Sarah, often during hours when Emily was asleep or at work. The pattern was undeniable. The betrayal had not been a single mistake. It was deliberate and ongoing. The realization cut deeper than the scene she witnessed in the hotel suite. Her own sister had participated in planning bridal showers, fittings, and family dinners while hiding a secret relationship with her fiancé. The pain slowly transformed into something colder. Emily stopped crying. She stopped pacing. Instead, she started thinking carefully. She no longer saw herself as a victim. She saw herself as someone who needed control. 2 months after the wedding, Emily suggested a quiet weekend away at her family's cottage in northern Ontario. The invitation surprised both Daniel and Sarah. She presented it as an opportunity to clear the air and settle unresolved tension in private. She explained that the city felt suffocating and that distance from Toronto might help everyone think clearly. Her tone remained steady and controlled, giving no hint of deeper intention. The cottage had belonged to her late grandfather. It sat near a cold, dark lake surrounded by thick forest. The nearest town was several kilometers away, and mobile reception was unreliable. Emily had spent childhood summers there, learning the trails and understanding how isolated the property truly was. She knew the layout of every room, the condition of the wiring, and the storage shed behind the main structure. Daniel agreed quickly, believing this was a sign of reconciliation. He assumed Emily was emotionally exhausted and ready to move forward. Sarah hesitated at first, but eventually accepted, perhaps believing the worst of the conflict had passed. Neither of them questioned why Emily insisted they all travel together in one vehicle. On the drive north, heavy gray clouds gathered in the sky. Weather reports warned of an approaching storm system expected to bring strong winds and rain across the region. The timing seemed unfortunate but manageable. Emily remained focused on the road, her expression unreadable. When they arrived, the air felt colder than expected. The lake was still, reflecting the darkening sky. Inside the cottage, the scent of wood and old furniture lingered. Emily moved confidently through the space, preparing dinner and lighting the fireplace. As night fell and rain began tapping against the windows, the isolation became more noticeable. The forest felt endless. The storm grew louder, and inside that quiet cottage, tension quietly tightened. 2 months after the wedding, Emily suggested a quiet weekend away at her family's cottage in northern Ontario. The invitation surprised both Daniel and Sarah. She presented it as an opportunity to clear the air and settle unresolved tension in private. She explained that the city felt suffocating and that distance from Toronto might help everyone think clearly. Her tone remained steady and controlled, giving no hint of deeper intention. The cottage had belonged to her late grandfather. It sat near a cold, dark lake surrounded by thick forest. The nearest town was several kilometers away, and mobile reception was unreliable. Emily had spent childhood summers there, learning the trails and understanding how isolated the property truly was. She knew the layout of every room, the condition of the wiring, and the storage shed behind the main structure. Daniel agreed quickly, believing this was a sign of reconciliation. He assumed Emily was emotionally exhausted and ready to move forward. Sarah hesitated at first, but eventually accepted, perhaps believing the worst of the conflict had passed. Neither of them questioned why Emily insisted they all travel together in one vehicle. On the drive north, heavy gray clouds gathered in the sky. Weather reports warned of an approaching storm system expected to bring strong winds and rain across the region. The timing seemed unfortunate but manageable. Emily remained focused on the road, her expression unreadable. When they arrived, the air felt colder than expected. The lake was still, reflecting the darkening sky. Inside the cottage, the scent of wood and old furniture lingered. Emily moved confidently through the space, preparing dinner and lighting the fireplace. As night fell and rain began tapping against the windows, the isolation became more noticeable. The forest felt endless. The storm grew louder, and inside that quiet cottage, tension quietly tightened. By midnight, the storm had intensified. Wind pushed violently against the cottage walls, and rain struck the windows in sharp bursts. The power flickered several times before settling into a dim glow from a few working lamps. The isolation of the property felt heavier than before, as if the forest itself had closed in around them. Earlier that evening, the atmosphere inside had remained tense but controlled. Dinner was quiet. Movements were careful. Emily observed everything with unsettling calm. She noted where Daniel placed his phone, how Sarah avoided prolonged eye contact, and how both seemed eager for the weekend to end quickly. The storm outside provided a strange cover, masking small sounds within the house. Sometime after midnight, neighbors several kilometers away later reported seeing a faint orange glow through the trees. According to the official timeline, the fire began shortly after. Flames spread rapidly along the dry wooden beams of the older structure. The wind fed the blaze, pushing heat through the narrow hallways and toward the bedrooms. Emergency services were called by a passing driver who noticed smoke rising above the tree. By the time firefighters reached the remote location, the cottage was nearly consumed. The roof had partially collapsed, and thick smoke lingered in the air. Daniel and Sarah were found inside, overcome before they could escape. Their bodies were discovered in separate areas of the main room. Authorities initially suspected that the storm may have triggered an electrical fault. The cottage wiring was outdated, and lightning had struck nearby trees that same night. Emily was found near the edge of the lake, soaked and trembling. She claimed she had awakened to the smell of smoke and ran outside in panic. Her account seemed plausible in the chaos. But as the smoke cleared and investigators examined the ruins more closely, subtle details began to raise quiet suspicion. In the days following the fire, investigators treated the scene as a tragic accident. The storm had caused damage across the region, and several smaller electrical fires had been reported that same night. At first glance, the destruction at the cottage appeared consistent with faulty wiring and strong winds. Emily gave her statement calmly, repeating that she woke to a burning smell and saw flames spreading across the ceiling before she fled toward the lake. However, forensic teams conducted a deeper examination once debris was cleared. Specialists noticed irregular burn patterns on the floor near the hallway and kitchen entrance. The fire did not appear to have started from a single electrical source. Instead, there were signs of multiple ignition points. Laboratory testing later confirmed the presence of gasoline residue in areas far from the electrical panel. Attention quietly shifted toward Emily. Security footage from a gas station located about 40 kilometers from the cottage showed her purchasing a small red fuel container earlier that afternoon. She had used her debit card, leaving a clear transaction record. When questioned, she explained it was intended for the family boat stored near the dock. Investigators found the boat tank nearly full. Phone data revealed that Emily had researched topics related to property fires and insurance claims in the weeks before the trip. Although such searches alone did not prove guilt, the timing raised concern. Financial records also showed she had finalized changes to shared marital assets shortly before the weekend getaway, transferring full ownership into her name. What had initially seemed like unfortunate timing during a storm now appeared carefully arranged. Detectives reconstructed the timeline repeatedly, comparing weather reports, call logs, and fuel purchase receipts. The more they analyzed the evidence, the less accidental the fire appeared. Eventually, authorities made their decision. The arrest shocked the community. News outlets across Canada covered the story intensely, portraying it as a tragic chain of betrayal and revenge. Emily appeared calm during court appearances, dressed plainly, her expression controlled and unreadable. Observers struggled to match the composed woman in the courtroom with the calculated actions described by prosecutors. During the trial, the prosecution presented a detailed timeline. They outlined the gasoline purchase, the financial transfers, and the internet searches. Fire experts testified that the blaze had been deliberately accelerated. Investigators explained how the storm provided natural cover, reducing the likelihood of immediate suspicion. The evidence suggested planning rather than panic. The defense took a different approach. They focused on the psychological impact of discovering her husband and sister together on her wedding night. Mental health specialists described emotional trauma, humiliation, and betrayal severe enough to destabilize judgment. They argued that her actions were influenced by overwhelming distress rather than cold intention. Midway through the trial, a new piece of information changed the emotional tone of the courtroom. Financial investigators revealed that Daniel had secretly taken out a large life insurance policy on Emily shortly before the wedding. Further examination showed unusual online searches from Daniel's devices about accidental drownings and staged mishaps. Evidence suggested he and Sarah may have been planning to harm Emily during their honeymoon to claim a payout. The revelation complicated everything. The narrative of pure revenge blurred into something darker. Emily's actions no longer appeared entirely unprovoked. After weeks of testimony, the jury delivered a verdict of manslaughter instead of first-degree murder. The court acknowledged premeditation, but also recognized the extreme emotional circumstances.